Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Every Man's Thoughts. In today's video, we're going to break down an interview with Lenny Henry, where he discloses that the upcoming Amazon Lord of the Rings series will have black hobbits and, inexplicably, cover the early days of the Shire. I know a lot of people don't like this type of political discussion in their entertainment. To that end, the first half of the video will strictly focus on what impact these revelations have on the story and theme in general, while the second half of the video will concentrate on the underlying politics of the story. So, with that, let's get started. I know many people have already seen other YouTubers or heard other opinions, so I'm going to replay the original Lenny Henry quote so that he is quoted accurately without outside interpretation. As you listen, pay close attention to the buzzwords he uses. This offers a glimpse to the mentality behind the real message that he's trying to convey.
And what's notable about this is that about this run of the book, it's a prequel to the age that we've seen in the films and the books. It's about the early days of the Shire and of of Tolkien's environment. It's the early days of it. So we're an indigenous population of Harfoots, and we're Hobbits, but we're called Harfoots, and we're multicultural. We're a tribe. We're not a race. So there are black and Asian and brown and even Maori types within it. And it's a whole brand new set of adventures that see some of the origins of different characters. And it's going to take at least 10 years to tell the story.
Early days of the Shire, indigenous peoples, that see some of the origins of different characters. Nobody was expecting a 100% faithful adaptation of the source material. That's just not possible, and it never has been. But if you're a fan, how could you possibly look at this as anything other than a completely unnecessary retcon of the history of the Hobbits, the Shire, the whole area, in fact, the humans, and the relationship between the Hobbits and the humans? For those that don't know the backstory, the Shire wasn't even founded until 1500 years into the Third Age. So at a minimum, we're talking 1500 years early. Second, hobbits weren't indigenous to that area. They migrated there, and when they got there, there were already humans on the land. In exchange for being allowed to settle on human land, the hobbits acknowledged the rightful human king, agreed to obey his laws, and even paid tribute. Does this sound like an indigenous people? Now, though, if what Lenny Henry said was accurate, as humans begin to expand their lands, they're going to be running into possibly even displacing hobbits that were already there. Indigenous people, he said. You can see how this fundamentally changes the narrative, the politics, and the history of both peoples and their lands. I sincerely hope that these machinations are just so they can have hobbits in the area, instead of some form of contrivance so they can have white human explorers displacing people of color hobbits off of what is now Hobbit land. Now, there could be some sun on the horizon here. I have seen other commenters or YouTubes, whatever, speculate that they believe Lenny Henry is mistaken when he used the word the Shire, and they believe that these hobbits are going to be someplace else. This would certainly make more sense, so I'm going to have to say that this assumption is at least reasonable. However, I've yet to see any evidence to support this assumption other than common sense, and that is a little bit thin to try and directly refute a statement by a person who's obviously in the know, in Lenny Henry himself. Also, if these are completely different hobbits from a completely different region, then how do they, and I quote, seed some of the origins of different characters? In either case, I am hopeful that he was mistaken about this being the Shire, but I'm also skeptical. Even if we are lucky and they decide that these hobbits are from someplace else and not to prostitute the history of the Shire as we know it, we still don't escape unscathed. Season 1 is projected to be a total of about 8 hours, with 2 of those hours dedicated to deep backstory, likely in Valinor. This means we only have 6 hours of screen time to lay the groundwork for all the Second Age stories we wanted to see. The founding of Numenor, Lindon, Eregion, and the forging of the Rings of Power with Celebrimbor, Galadriel's ascent to power, the dwarves, the Nazgul, and so much more. I know that most of my American audience is relatively unfamiliar with Lenny Henry because he's just not a known quantity here, and that's understandable. But in the UK, he is a true A-lister. He's often referred to as a living legend. This means he didn't sign on for a bit part. In fact, we know he rides out the entirety of the first season. Thus, for the last 6 episodes and the bulk of season 1, for each 1-hour episode, we're likely to lose 10 to 15 minutes telling the story of hobbits that nobody wanted. I understand that that is an opinion-based statement, but Tolkien himself said the hobbits don't belong in the Second Age. Moreover, the price we're paying for these hobbits is that all of the other Second Age stories we wanted to see now have to fit into about the same amount of screen time as Return of the King Extended Edition for the entire first season. And there's no guarantee we're not going to continue to lose 20 to 25% of our screen time telling Hobbit stories in future seasons either. I'm sorry, but no thank you. With that, let's now transition into the politics of the situation. If that's not something you enjoy, you've been warned, so let's continue. In his interview, Mr. Henry states that the proto-hobbits are a tribe, not a race. Therefore, they are still essentially hobbits. Therefore, in the context of how we use these words in the modern narrative, this is absolutely a race swap. Regardless of how you feel about switching races in modern adaptations, we can at least form the basis of an honest conversation by being truthful when it happens. And in this case, it absolutely happened here. What's worse, and far more important to me, is this decision appears to have been made to comply with woke mentality and marketing reasons instead of storytelling, and that's what drives fans crazy. Well, the Peter Jackson movies had hobbits, so we have to have hobbits so people can relate. And since all of the other main characters are already described as white, well, you have to have the people of color somewhere, otherwise Twitter's going to call you mean names. In reality, there were far better storytelling opportunities that would have included actual diversity and, God forbid, stayed true to the source material, but unfortunately they didn't fit the needs of the agenda. For instance, in his interview, Mr. Henry talks about Maori types, which are essentially island peoples. Last I checked, the Numenorians were an island people as well. Wouldn't that be a more natural and canonically accurate way to explore certain aspects of that culture? In fact, the Numenorians traveled extensively, traded and intermarried with people from a wide variety of lands, and had a very cosmopolitan culture. Again, a natural and canonically accurate opportunity to explore these issues without unnecessarily changing a people's history. In some of my previous videos, I spoke about the Blue Wizards and the Easterlings, and I think the Southerlings as well. Think about this for a minute. You have the Blue Wizards, which is a very popular idea amongst the fans, traveling to places that are actually in the books that are representing Middle Eastern or North African culture. Different weather means different armor. Different armor means different weapons. A completely different region means completely different societal norms as well. Different food, architecture, or whatever cultural idiosyncrasy you can think of. We're talking about actual cultural diversity instead of just blackwashing some hobbits and the worst kind of tokenism. The problem is, as I said before, ideas like these don't fit the prescribed agenda. These things actually take courage, effort, and skill. The courage to do it, the effort to actually learn about other cultures, and the skill to pull it off. But why would you go to all this trouble when to them diversity is literally only skin deep? As a fan, you have to wonder if it was more important for them to retcon the history of the hobbits for diversity reasons than it was to tell a good story. If you're thinking that's just not a possibility, I'm guessing you haven't seen Doctor Who lately. Well, everybody, that's it for me this week. Please consider hitting the like or subscribe, and I will see you next time.